We go. Hey, I'm Ryan, or Ryan J on GitHub, Twitter, IRC, pretty much most places online you could find me as Ryan J. I'm going to be doing a talk on building with JavaScript, and we'll touch on a couple different subjects. I'm assuming since this is the beginner track that you guys are relatively new to Node.js, maybe have some JavaScript experience, but maybe not Node.js experts. So I'm going to start super low level and build you guys up to showing you some more advanced build tools and some stuff that I'm really keen to learn more about. So here's a shortened URL for these slides. I have this ugly long link there that I'll swap out and replace next chance I get to edit my slides. I'll update that. But here's a short URL if you guys want to follow along on your laptops. So like I said, I'm Ryan. Ryan J at Red Hat is my email. I work at Red Hat on their OpenShift project. It's a open source hosting platform, kind of similar to Heroku. You could kind of think of it as like an open source Heroku. I'll do a demo where I'm actually going to deploy to OpenShift later as part of my build process. So you'll see a tiny bit about OpenShift, but it's mostly going to be JavaScript build stuff. So let me get to it here. Here's the agenda I wanted to cover. NPM, we'll start talking about NPM, and then we'll go with Grunt, yeoman, Bower. I'll do a little demo, and we'll see what else is kind of on the horizon in the future that you guys may want to keep an eye on. How many of you guys are JavaScript developers for your day job? Like, and how many of these guys, what about Node.js? Okay, so mostly client-side JavaScript, right? So this should be super relevant for you guys as a way to get started with Node. And yeah, we'll get into it. Here's a way, so if you already have Node.js installed, I'm going to assume that's kind of entry level. Like, if you don't have it installed, go ahead and get it. Once you have it installed, you'll automatically get a packaging system called NPM that comes along with it. There's some kind of, I don't know if it actually stands for, it doesn't stand for Node Package Manager. If you ask the company who actually runs NPM is called NPM Incorporated, and they say, for their company at least, NPM stands for Nice People Matter. So they're a really cool company. They're located in in Oakland, which is where I come from. So it's cool to have some of these guys as neighbors. If you want to install any of these tools, you could run npm install with this -g flag, or you could do -- global. And what that does is installs these command line tools system-wide, so you'll be able to use them from the terminal. So I'm going to do a decent amount of hacking around the command line here. Here's a link to npmjs.org. Definitely check it out. Package up everything you can. NPM has recently become the most popular packaging system. More packages than pypy.org for your Python guys, or Pear for PHP, or Ruby gems. More packages here than anywhere else, and it's because there's a great community here. So you guys can feel free to contribute. It's really easy to upload modules. I've got one or two that I maintain. I'm going to open up real quick. Here's the package.json spec, and this is on npmjs.org. There's a bunch of different fields in here. You could find a lot of specifics about each individual field in this file here, but I cover a lot of the major fields, or a few of the major fields here in this presentation. So there's two main blocks for managing dependencies inside your package.json file. There's one section that's just called dependencies, and then there's another one called dev dependencies. If you wanted to do an install where you only installed the dependencies and not the dev dependencies, you could do npm install -- production. That's pretty rare. Most people just run npm install when they get a packaged Node project. So for most projects, there's you're not sure how to get it started, you're not sure where to start, how to configure it. With Node.js, it's really simple. It's just npm install followed by npm run. I think I've got or npm start. So if you wanted to save dependencies into your package.json, here's some of the flags you could use. You add -- save and then the module name. And if you want to save it as a dev dependency, -- save dev and then the module name. That helps you keep your package.json file up to date as you work. And so you can always check to make sure you have a recent dependency version or you're working with the right code. I'll open up one of my package.json files in a minute. We could see. In fact, maybe I'll crack one open now. Let's see, do I have one in here? Let's take a look at this package.json. So there's a name of the project, there's a version number, here's all the dependencies I have, and then this has a whole mess of dev dependencies because I'm using Grunt. And Grunt has, it's pretty well decomposed into a lot of dependent services, and this is kind of what you want to do with Node modules. If you're building modules, is take a look at what's out there. Odds are someone's already implemented something really close to what you want to do, and so if there's something out there, take advantage of the best of what's out there. Build small reusable pieces that you could then chain together and link together. Kind of like with Unix, you have command line scripts, and you could pipe one thing into the output of one into the input of the next command and chain a couple together. That's kind of how you should think about Node modules if you can. So Grunt's done a pretty good job of breaking out a lot of these requirements into submodules, and we'll see if this ends up being a good strategy for them. There's a lot in here, which is good and bad. We'll see. It depends how well they're reusing the rest of the community modules, and we'll see how that impacts this demo later. Here's another important field here. We have this scripts section, and currently there's no script start, so I'm just going to add one in. This is something you pretty much always want, and let's say we just want to run grunt serve here. I'll cover a little bit more about Grunt later. But then what I could do in order to start this is just run npm start, and it should fire up that server. See, it's running grunt serve there. So, okay, yeah. So really, npm start is just going to run whatever is in your scripts.start field. If you're curious about this, so another thing, take a look around. I don't have a Node modules folder. If I did npm install here, it should grab that list of dependencies, like I said earlier, right? And it's going to run and install against all of these. So what this is going to do, I should have, now you can see there's a Node modules folder. I could take a look inside. It's already downloading all kinds of dependencies. That's enough to look at. But there's a debate between some people on how clean do you want your Git repository to be. You guys all work with revision control, right? Just tell me yes, even if you don't. So hopefully you are Git users and you all have a GitHub account. And then, so you want to keep your project source minimal. You don't want to include a bunch of, usually my policy in the past has been don't check in your dependencies because that's someone else's code, right? You want to keep your project clean. You have your package.json that says, here's the exact version numbers I need. So why would you want to check in your Node modules? And here is a really good explanation of, well, there's actually a great reason why you might want to. This is written by Michael Rogers, or McKeel, I think. It looks like his name is spelled online. And I know this is really hard to read, but he has a great breakdown of why you might want to check in node modules. And it really depends on, it basically, here's the recap. Let me just go right to the spoiler here. If you are distributing another node module, you don't want to check in the node module dependencies of that package. But if you have a website you're going to deploy, he says you definitely do want to check in your node modules folder. So that's kind of how he splits that, that debate. And I think he's right on, and he has a lot of good reasons why he backs that up here. A lot of it, one of the good reasons here is you could use things like grep or other basic Unix tools to really traverse your whole source tree, including the dependencies, and you have a lot more visibility if something goes wrong. And you're not relying on the build process to happen on the server, so you're not dependent on npmjs.org in your production environment. And I know for some people, they're production environments behind a firewall, and they can't call out to npm to pull down dependencies in that production stage, possibly. I don't know. So that's a great article for you guys if you're just getting started and want to learn more about node modules. I definitely recommend it. So here's Grunt. How many of you guys have used Grunt before? A couple people? Oh, good number of people. So this is more like client-side developers, usually new to Node.js. This is kind of the front door that I see a lot of people walk in through. They want to do primarily client-side development. We did earlier, I had a code sample where I had, command line example, where we ran npm install grunt CLI. Grunt actually has two pieces. It has a thing you install globally called grunt CLI, and then there's something you install locally that's just called Grunt. That's going to be your, whatever version of Grunt you actually have is installed locally within your project, allowing you to basically have multiple versions of Grunt on the same system. Depending on what that project needs, it could say, hey, I need an old version of Grunt because that's what I'm written to take advantage of. And this abstraction allows you to do that. Grunt is separated from Grunt CLI, but you still have all over your system the ability to run Grunt from the command line. So I already showed you Grunt serve. The cool things Grunt serve allows you to do, you guys all sound like you mostly already know this, but it'll combine all of your files. Well, that's Grunt build. Grunt serve watches all your files. So as you're working, if you make changes, you don't need to kill your web server and reload it. Grunt will automatically do that stuff for you. It makes local development on web pages really painless, really easy to do, really fast. Grunt build is also great, helps combine and minify all of your client-side sources. Super useful, helps you drop things down to just one or two includes. Or, this is my improved suggestion for people that are looking to move beyond Grunt. You can actually use npm as a task runner. Not very many people know about this because I think this is mostly like a failure of the documentation team or the developer relations department to like fully make people aware of this functionality. But Grunt will work great as a task runner. Here's an article by Substack or James Halliday where he talks about using Grunt or using just your package.json and npm in order to run everything you need to do. So what did we need from Grunt before? We wanted to run a build where we were going to combine all of our JavaScript, client-side JavaScript down into one file. Here he's combining not just the client-side but also server-side JavaScript down into one script include. He could also pipe it through Uglify or other things that you may have in your dev dependencies. And so you end up with a static bundle that's a single JavaScript include that not only combines and minifies all of your client-side sources, but your server-side code as well, allowing you to use NPM modules in your browser. So this is really cool. Like I said earlier, NPM's now the largest package repository out of any language. So having instant access to all those packages in your browser is a huge win. So you don't have to use the NPM task runner in order to do this. You could just use Browserify. But Substack does a great job of breaking out, here's how you do build with NPM as a task runner. Here's how you would do your watch, just like Grunt normally does during local development. Here you could build your CSS, you could watch your CSS, and here's what your resulting package.json might look like. So here in the scripts we have start, which is just running our server.js, but he also has a watch task, a build task, and a couple other tasks that can, and these tasks can call other tasks as well. Like here you see the build one is actually running npm run build.js and npm run build CSS, and doing both of those tasks at the same time. So this is another great blog post that I want to make sure you guys know about, because it's not really publicized particularly well anywhere other than Substack's blog. That's the best place I could find for this information. But it works great. I've rewritten a couple of my projects to use NPM as a task runner. So we did a quick look at Browserify there, but like I said, this lets you require modules and then use them in the browser. Helps bundle up all your dependencies. You want to install this globally because you want access to this command on the command line. So, from the other perspective, I started off, hey, here's Grunt, and then I kind of trashed it a little bit and said, you could just use NPM instead. Use whatever fits your needs the best, honestly. But I'm trying to show you kind of both sides of the debate on these build tools. And I know some of the core Node.js guys often frown on build tools. They're not big fans of it because they're like, well, why don't you just write it all from scratch? And that's not great advice for everybody. But yeah, let's get into yeoman a little bit. Yeoman is basically, how many people have used yeoman before? All right, cool. So templating and scaffolding for your applications, JavaScript applications, right? So if you are from a Ruby on Rails background, this is going to be your best friend. One of my favorite generators, and I think this is the most popular community maintained generator, last I heard, is written by Daft Monk or Tyler Hinkle. I actually contributed a couple lines of code to this, or more than a couple lines to this generator in order to get it running on OpenShift. But here is the generator. Angular full stack is the project on GitHub. And I've heard a lot of people give him, I'm not a yeoman expert, but I've heard a lot of people give this guy a lot of congratulations for how he has broken down his project into a whole bunch of sub-generators. So this is a Angular generator that will be used to scaffold out your application. And then there are a file of generators here, and there's also one for Heroku, one for OpenShift, and a couple other things. So those mostly have to do with later phases of the build process where you're actually going to deploy. We could take a look at this file, but maybe I'll save some of this code for when I'm actually going through that demo. Here, Angular full stack, and maybe I'll just start this demo up. So this Angular full stack generator generates what is commonly known as, or maybe not so commonly known as, a mean stack application. Mean stands for MongoDB, Express, Angular, and Node.js. I have a blog post on this if you guys are interested in more detail. I kind of break down what are all the pieces and how to install each of these chunks. how you can do your develop work, your deploy work, and even do some scaling of your Node.js services as well. So I'm going to take a step back and actually run this generator. Let's see, this one, I already have the Angular full stack generator installed. So I will just run this yo Angular full stack and then my app name. Whoops. And we'll kick off this build. Let's call this one Midwest JS. To keep it all lowercase. All right, so usually when I go, this is the ASCII representation of the yeoman person there. And so yeoman gives you a nice kind of interactive scaffolding interface. You could just walk through and answer yes or no questions. I don't particularly have Sass and Compass installed for managing my CSS, so I'm going to answer no to this one. Yeah, sure, I'd like to use Twitter Bootstrap in my application. Here's a couple optional packages for Angular that you could use the spacebar to kind of toggle these on and off. I'm going to include all of these in my project. I'm going to say, yeah, give me MongoDB with Mongoose, Passport, authentication. Usually this is a lot of work putting all these pieces together into one app. And so it's nice to be able to scaffold up something in almost no time that has all the pieces fully working and ready to go. On the other hand, you know, what's the problem with just having like a Git project that already has this pre-built? You know, is there a huge difference? It kind of depends on whether you have a really clear use case for this kind of like a factory pattern with your development, where you want to crank out a bunch of very similar sites but then customize it, you know, at different points. And usually for development workshops, that's not a major use case. It's more kind of like onboarding new community members. It's a good use case there. But so let's take a look at this project we generated. Here's all the files. Let me do a tree on this node modules folder. Look at all this. Yeah, right? Yeah. And let me check out the disk usage on this folder here. We're up to 200, I think it's 200 megs. Yeah, 200 megs in this directory that I just scaffolded up. That's huge for a JavaScript app. So either, I don't know, to me that seems like something's going wrong, right? And if you look at that tree of node modules, like this is dependency hell right here, you know? And part of it is because in each of these, if we look inside the node modules folder, let's say if I look inside node modules / grunt, there's another node modules. Grunt has its own package.json, and that's pulling in these, and then I could check inside, well, what's event emitter need? Oh, that has another node modules probably. Oh, this one doesn't. But, you know, like these things can go super deep. So you want to make sure you are reusing packages, if you know, and being smart about how you do your dependency tree, because it can really get out of hand, especially if you're relying on generators to do a lot of your work. So watch out for that. Here is, so using the generator that I wrote, or you can do yo Angular full stack, and then I could run that particular OpenShift subgenerator in order to extend my app. There's other things, like I did a workshop yesterday for loopback where you'd run something like this. Oops. Get my calendar out of the way, sorry guys. There's other generators depending on your system that you can use for adding models, for creating REST endpoints, for setting up access control lists, for setting up relations between models. There was a workshop yesterday on loopback, and so we covered a really advanced application development, and it was pretty much all command line driven. And we got to the end of the workshop, and we had only written just a few lines of code in the whole class. It was mostly just monkeying around with the command line, but there's a lot of great things you could do with a scaffolding system. You could get a lot of work done. Anyone who's done Ruby on Rails development in the past will say, hey, look, this is a great way to get started. It may not be the code you end up bringing to production, but it's great for building demos. So, and great if you're just getting started with something like Angular and you want a fully fledged app to really play around with. So this takes a little while to do this. Since I'm shipping 200 megs here across the network, that does take a little bit of time. I'll go back to my slides and then we'll check in on this demo in a minute. So one of the things that Yeoman is using in order to do client-side dependency management is Bower. Bower can help you manage dependencies for things like jQuery, Twitter Bootstrap, all kinds of different, things that you would traditionally think of as I'm going to get it off some CDN from somewhere, and Bower gives you a nice kind of manifest or a package list of here's the files I want, here's the versions I want. Go ahead and pull them all down so we can combine and minify down to just one single script include in your client-side source. So Bower's kind of cool. Here's a couple other things that you might want to use specifically for CSS. There's something called rework that allows you to use this @import line like you'd have in your CSS, but you just do @import and then you have a module name. And if that module on NPM contains CSS code, then you could basically import CSS into your app using this @import line and then whatever the module name is. So let's take a quick look at this. This really makes me want to ditch Bower and start checking in all my CSS files into npm.js.org, right? Just distribute them as packages and I'm ready to go. So here you could see plugins. Oh, they don't have a great example here. They basically use a @import thing. I got another example I'll show in a second. Continue connecting. So here is this should be my site here with my basic demo that is live. And I could run the same thing locally just with Grunt serve. Resonate's another one that allows you to use these @import lines. I think it has a slightly better example here. No? Sorry guys. Resin. This one might. This is what it depends on. Dependencies. Okay, so here's in your CSS file, you do this @import with the node package name, and it just brings in whatever the contents of that package and puts it into your CSS. So hopefully, it also does some CSS pre-processing. Interesting projects to take a look at. Not a core part of this demo, but yeah, interesting stuff to take a look at anyway. I'm going to open up another directory and run grunt serve here. And we could see what this local project looks like. So here we go. Here's the Midwest.js app that I just generated. It's got yeoman scaffolds. It's got AngularJS. It's got Karma for tests, MongoDB and Mongoose. It already has a login and sign up that are working. I could go create an account here and log in. This is pretty advanced. And I could log back out, right? I think it even sends email and everything. This is like a full-fledged like startup in a box almost, and it's automatically watching all of my code. So I could go over here, open a new terminal, go inside this app folder, views, partials, main is the one, and we could change this to hello Midwest.js. So you could see I had, let's see, is this the one? Here's, this reload just fired off because I edited app views partials main. It's watching my files, and it should have reloaded my server automatically, right? It refreshed my browser content. I didn't even hit reload. This just automatically updated my browser. Pretty cool, right? So now if we wanted to go ahead and move this to production, we now have this same app deployed online. Open this up. This is before I made the change, right? I ran that OpenShift subgenerator to generate my remote application instance, but I didn't check in those changes that I made. So here's how you would go ahead and you could run a grunt build. This will combine minify. That was what's going on up here. It's running uglify to process the JavaScript, CSS min on the CSS. All of this is configurable in your Grunt file. Each project will have a Grunt file here, and this kind of breaks down. Here's what I'm going to watch. Here's how to open up a web browser. Let's see how that build is doing. It's not it. Here we go. Build finished. This is not the right folder. This one. I'll just work in here. So I could go into this dist folder. This dist is the resulting build that I've just generated. This is basically a minified version of the application source I've been working with. Same thing, it has a package.json. I actually have a .git folder just inside the dist, the compiled app. And that allows me to ship the compiled app separately from the source code of the app. So for this particular model, you kind of want two Git repositories, one at the top level for your source code, and then one inside the dist folder for just pushing the results of the builds. So I'll do a git add, make sure I got everything, modify the file, great, git commit, updating the title, git push, and what did I call the git remote? I think I updated this generator, so if you run the OpenShift generator multiple times, it'll set up multiple remotes. So this remote is called Midwest.js. I could have one called staging, one called production, one called test. So I'll do git push Midwest.js, and I'll send whatever's in my master branch, and we'll update our live copy of the app. This is Midwest.js. This is my free domain. Oh, it's down now because it's getting redeployed. I have to wait till this push is done. Let's see. Should be just about there. It's tough knowing how long it's going to take with a 200 meg bundle, and it should just be pushing just the changes. Alright, there we go. Post received success. Deployment completed. Now I could check out my updated site with the updated title. Cool. Let me get back to the slides. So, last thing I want to cover, how many of you guys work with streams? Not very many, right? You, couple people. Good for you guys. All right. If you really want to get the full power of Node.js, look into trying to send everything as streams, that can really allow you to chain, like I was saying with node modules, you kind of want to chain several together like you do with command line tools. And if you do everything as a stream, you get a lot of flexibility. So here's a really cool new project that I would keep an eye on. It's called Gasket, and this allows you to do really complex build pipelines for Node.js. So here it basically allows you to, it's kind of like a piping build process or something. You can stitch together a bunch of node modules with Gasket in order to do complex build pipelines. I'm not an expert in Gasket, but another project I would definitely recommend you guys take a look into. Let's see, where's my slides? Okay. All right. So I guess here's my wrap up. I've got links to npmjs.org, Browserify, Gasket, the mean stack demo if you guys are interested in kind of kicking the tires on that a little bit more. I don't have a whole lot more content here. You guys have any questions about any of these build scripts? No?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Having a project, so I have a front-end project that basically has a component, a module of it, some functionality of it that can stand alone on its own. Mm-hmm. And in some circumstances could be plugged into a broader application.
Yeah.
Is this a common pattern for front-end applications, or?
It's a module that could be reused across several applications.
Yeah, I guess more or less there's some subset of functionality that's capable of standing on its own.
Yeah.
And that subset will also eventually be part of the broader application.
Yeah. So it has its own server, or it's just some JavaScript code that?
JavaScript code.
Yeah.
So it's an Angular app.
Okay.
And it eventually will go into a more feature-complete Angular app on its own. The way that I'm handling it right now is with Angular modules.
Okay.
And then accordingly, I'm wondering if there's a better solution for something like that.
I mean, generally my blanket advice is package everything up as a node module, put it on npmjs.org, as long as you're comfortable with it being public. But I haven't done as much packaging for Angular features, and so one thing I would kind of advise people to steer clear of is sub repos. I've seen like some people try to do a Git sub repo within another repo, and that can cause a lot of problems. I've seen a lot of people jump into like, oh, this looks great, and then it totally backfires on them, and they turn around like 2 months later and they're like, never again will I ever do subrepos. So I'd maybe avoid subrepos, but yeah, if you can, package up as a node module, especially if it's something you think other people might reuse. And if it's not something people, I don't know, yeah, and maybe even break it down into smaller modules, you know, or see if there's parts of it that already exist in pmjs.org, and you could reuse some components of those, maybe. Yeah.
You can also set up private repositories as well. So run yeoman.
Oh, nice. Is that new?
No, you can add to the config your repository.
Oh, in your package.json.
Right, and point it to any server. There's also a walkthrough on NPM. I think there's a blog post about duplicating with couching the entire NPM repo.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing. I know the whole npmjs.org used to run on a couch-based server, and they've recently moved it off of that due to scaling problems. But you could probably run the old version that, the old couch server. I'm not sure if the source is available, but, run something like that. I also know that NPM has started doing as a service hosting of the kind of local hosting of the NPM registry for corporations who want to have a copy of that behind their firewall for part of their build process.
There's a project called Kappa, which is a front-end caching service for NPM. So you can publish to it, but it's hosted on your local server. But if you do an NPM install, it will fetch off of real NPM. So you can publish, you can just have it really small. It's on disk.
Is that Kappa with a K?
Yeah.
And 2 P's?
Yeah.
All right, I'll have to look into that. That sounds pretty cool. Yeah, I know that's for the people I work with a lot of Red Hat customers, and so Red Hat always has big companies that want to run something behind a firewall, and they're like, great, let's get on this hip new Node.js bandwagon, and then they're like, all right, how do I build this thing? And like, well, you need to connect to the internet, step one, and they're like, internet? We're from the past, and yeah. I don't know. Yeah, that's good to know. Kappa sounds great. NPM Inc. Is another one if you're like a corporate kind of entity, contract with them. What's that?
NPM what?
NPM Incorporated. They're the company behind NPM. They are just a couple blocks from where I live. Cool guys. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions? I might wrap it up.
I have a Django app that represents my server side, so instead of Node.js, I have Django on the server. I've read that you can use a Grunt package, which is an NPM package, that serves as a proxy. Because you have Grunt serve, which runs off like port 9000.
Yeah.
And I wanted to connect to my Django app API, which is running on a different port locally.
Uh-huh.
And so obviously if they're on different hosts, authentic that.
Yeah, cross, yeah.
You can run a proxy. Have you ever done that before?
I have not done a proxy, and especially even if you were trying to combine two ports, I don't know if a proxy would do it.
What I read is that you would have the Grunt serve would run a proxy.
Oh.
Would then connect through to
A different back end or something?
A different back end. So that
Yeah.
you're not dealing with any cross-domain issues.
Yep.
You can keep using Grunt serve and have live reload, but all your API calls essentially go through that proxy and then up to the Django.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. You could make I would use a Node.js server to build that proxy. You could have here's my /CSS/JS, that all goes to Grunt,
Right.
and then anything that's /API or wherever your endpoints are, proxy that through. And Node is great about doing a callback and doing non-blocking I/O to handle all those background requests. So yeah, that should be easily solvable with a small Node.js server. And once you have that small Node.js server, you could start porting all the Django code over to JavaScript. Yeah. Cool. All right, anything else? I'm gonna call it quits there. Here's an ugly link to my slides. Here's a shorter link to the slides. And I'll post a link on Twitter or something as well. I'm Ryan J. Thanks again, guys.